Yeah, they're down. Welcome to the Rotary Club of LaGrange. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by the invocation by T.C. Wilder. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
May we pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this day, another day that you have allowed us all here to see. Thank you for another blessed gathering at our annual Wednesday Rotary meeting. Lord, thank you for blessing us with the health and strength that we do have. Thank you for friends and family. And just thank you once again for all the blessings you have bestowed upon us. Please we pray, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Sam. And now Cheryl,
Good afternoon. At this time, we'll recognize our visitors and guests. When I call your name, if you will please stand. We have Diane Harrell. She's the guest in white with John Harrell. We have Captain Coverton, with the Executive Director of Mesquite School, and she's also pending membership. And we also have Sherry Cody with Twin Cedars, and she's a guest of Rotary. Thank you all for coming.
I see a few members that look like visitors today. I haven't been here in a while, so it's good to see everybody. Birthdays and anniversaries, I don't think we have too many this week. Karen Thompson on October 6th. And Dee Linder has an anniversary, 9 years, on the 10th. So that's all we have this week. So happy birthday and happy anniversary to you all. Next, just a few announcements we got before we get to our program today. Please remember to silence your cell phone in order to pay attention to the program today. And I wanted to thank a few folks. Thanks to the Rotarians that showed up for the Boy Scout dinner last week. We had several at our table, but there was many Rotarians in the room representing Rotary, so that was great. And then also thank you for the Rotarians who participated this weekend in the Leaving LaGrange Better Than We Found It trash cleanup day at Jones Street Park, which was a pretty good turnout and pretty good cleanup. Next, I also want to thank Chunk Newman and Patsy Cook for this beautiful work of art, little free library that's going to go up and be a new addition to our town. I'll ask John Harrell to come up and tell us a little bit about this and what it is and how it got here.
As I've announced several times before, September was National Literacy Month, and then the little cards that I had on the table, thanks to all the Rotarians who checked something on those. Again, we'll be following up with that throughout this month. But I had reached directly out to Chunk because little free libraries, I don't know if you've seen them throughout town or not, the little boxes of books that anyone can borrow a book, read it, either pass it on to someone else or bring it back. My wife Diane, who is Executive Director of CLCP, stepping into the big shoes of Debbie Burdett, manages several of those and collects books. We're promoting literacy for mom, dad, and kids. But I reached out to Chunk and said, do you think Baxter Cook could build a little free library? I reached out to Natalie Hale of the Thread Trail, and I sort of identified a spot where I thought one would look good. Both of them bought in completely. Also to Trip Penn because it's on Callaway Park, just to the east of the Coleman Center. And Chunk said, well, can you send me a picture or something, or send me a plan? So I went to Mr. Google and found some little free libraries that I thought were pretty awesome. And so I'll be honest and say I sort of issued a little bit of a challenge. Well, he passed this on to Howard Watson, the superintendent, who passed the project on to James Moman at Baxter Cook and said, build something cool. When they called me last week and he said, John, you ought to come see this. All right, so I buzzed down to West Point and found everything, and I couldn't find Chunk immediately, but walked around back and walked into the shop and nobody was there, so I sort of started wandering and wandered into a room and I saw this. I was speechless. The sides open up, the front and the back open up. So we're going to fully embrace the two generations, the 2-gen approach to reading. We'll have books for mom and dad, books for the kids, and hopefully some flyers also. Right now it's at the south terminus of the Thread Trail. I can see myself walking up a couple of miles, sitting down, reading a chapter, putting the book back and walking back home and reading a chapter a day. The whole emphasis, though, again, is on making reading very easy for someone, grabbing a book instead of a device, and just promoting literacy throughout Troup County. We've got a long way to go, but little things like this hopefully steer some attention towards literacy. While I've got the microphone, I put out more little cards. Last week, Bill Honeycutt approached us about helping out with a bike race over the weekend that's for multiple sclerosis. I've separated these cards into Saturday helping out and Sunday helping out. The back has the opportunities. This is for an absolutely wonderful cause. I think I'm going to choose the early bird at 5:45 a.m. to noon, so I'll be staggering as we get close to noon. But there's some wonderful opportunities. If you want to use these as a reminder card for yourself, like my dentist gives me, take those if you like to sign up on one of these sheets up here. Again, a Saturday and a Sunday sheet to sign up for volunteering. But kudos to Chunk and everybody that built this. I'm still, every time I look at it, absolutely in awe. So check it out before you leave today.
I wonder if when people Google little free libraries from now on, they'll see this and say, what else could we do? Maybe that might be a little much for us to tackle, because that's impressive. That's a fantastic. Thank you very much for you and your team doing that job. Absolutely beautiful. One other, I wanted to just remind y'all that our district governor will be visiting our club later this month, 3 weeks from today on October 27th. So I'll keep y'all reminded of that, but she'll be here, and I want to make sure that we wear our any hardware and that you have Rotary related that day, and then we'll also bestow upon her the honorary Walter Y. Murphy Fellowship, and then there will be a reception for her the night before at the Pine Mountain Chalet. It's Tuesday at 6:30. So let me know if you're interested in that. I'll remind everybody next week and a little more information about all that. We do have a minute or two for Happy Dollars. If anybody has anything to put in the kitty. Yes, sir.
had our very first United Way Day of Caring last Thursday. I mentioned it to y'all as a volunteer opportunity. We had a great turnout. We were at Calumet Park. We helped the city with getting the park in shape. It was amazing. We had almost 50 volunteers. In addition to that, we had volunteers at Reality U with communities and schools. We had volunteers who helped move the CASA office, and we had volunteers who helped move some bookcases and books for Success by Six. And then we finished off at Wildleaf with a great event before Keith's event. And it was just wonderful. I just wanted to share that. And if we were, actually, we worked with the city, and before the day was over, they came up to me and asked if we could do this again, that it had been so successful. So we'll have another day in the spring, and hope y'all will consider coming out and volunteering for that.
Got happy dollars to call Barbara, it's back from Maine.
Yes.
And brought the best thing to come out of Maine. If you never had one, I'm not sharing mine.
I just want to share a happy dollar. We just finished on the West Point Lake Floating Classroom, serving all the 6th grade students here at Gardner Newman, Callaway Middle, and Long Cay Middle School. So that was about 700 kids who joined us on the Floating Classroom this past month. So thank y'all for that.
A couple of years ago, we took on a major project, and then COVID came along, and it was like, oh my goodness, are we crazy? But things are coming to pass, and I'm excited to announce that with the help of Pepsi, who is sponsoring the Inclusive Playground for our community, and then also Kia, who will be the naming sponsor for the Miracle League Field, construction has begun over there on Tomahawk Parkway. When you go by, you'll see the clearing. And so we're going to have that athletic complex there for the community, not just our community, but this will draw people from 75 miles around to the frame. So we're really excited that it's starting, and we're about 80 or 90% in our funding. So thanks for all your support.
This is a dollar of happiness for Barbara. Hello, Barbara. We had 60 people come out for K's to do. While I spilled beer in a toast on her laptop, and I was ashamed for that, but the machine survived. We muscled through, and the dollar is also for you all to remember your big free library, your public library.
I figured I should probably put a $10 bill in because I haven't been around, but haven't been out of my thoughts. And as I was driving up here, a little late, I apologize, I was thinking how lucky I am to be belonging to such a great service organization, and thank you.
Barbara.
We're gonna put $1 in because Barbara's back too. I want everybody to line up, put $1 in. Because Barbara's back. With that, I'll let Dr. Copeland introduce today's program.
It's a real pleasure, indeed, it's a privilege to be back with you and to introduce those of you here and to those who are attending virtually. Our guest speaker, who our speaker today is one of the foremost leaders in American medicine today. Sandy Freihofer was raised in Atlanta. Went to Georgia Tech, where she earned a degree in chemical engineering, magna cum laude, but didn't become a chemical engineer. She went to medical school at Emory. And I should mention, while she was at Tech, she was crowned Miss Georgia. At Emory, she again covered herself with honors. The highest honors All their postdoctoral training in her specialty, internal medicine, was at Emory, and she's still involved in Emory as a senior member of the volunteer faculty. Sandy was interested in the professional organizations of American medicine. Early on, her involvement in the American College of Physicians led to a blazing record of accomplishment. She became a member of the Board of Regents and was elected president, the youngest president ever at that time, and the second woman president. I should mention that the American College of Physicians is the largest organization of medical specialists in the world. The last time I saw it was about 165,000 members. At the same time, she was carrying on a large private practice in Atlanta. She turned her attention to the American Medical Association. Totally separate, but extremely powerful organization. And again, her presence was soon widely recognized. She went to the House of Delegates, became a member of the AMA's Board of Trustees, and was recently elected as chairman-elect for the Board of Trustees, and that is big. And she's the only person in my memory to head these two very powerful forces in American medicine and the world's medicine. She also has a remarkable career in medical communication. Some of you will remember her as CNN's top medical correspondent at one time, or you may remember her hosting on PBS, Your Health Matters, or her many programs on WebMD's Medscape. She has frequently testified before congressional committees and before the FDA. She chairs the AMA's Committee on Science and Public Health, where she has long been the liaison with the CDC and other agencies. She was involved with adult immunization before most of us ever heard of COVID. But I should say that I don't believe there is a professional mountain Dr. Krauthoffer could not climb, nor a glass ceiling that she couldn't shatter, and do it with both strength and grace. She is, in fact, as I said, one of the foremost leaders in American medicine today, and she was here to talk to us about the plague, this famine, and its vaccine. Sandy.
So many thanks to Dr. Copeland for inviting me to be here today. And Bob, thank you for that kind introduction. You are most certainly my mentor, my advisor, my advocate, and my dear friend. And I wouldn't be here without Bob and Jenny, literally. I wouldn't be here in LaGrange, Georgia. But I just don't mean here in LaGrange. I mean throughout my medical career, my entire career in organized medicine. I would have been president of the American College of Physicians and chair-elect of the AMA Board of Trustees. Bob was and still is a giant in medicine, and he has always lifted me up and just set me on my glide path. So many thanks, Bob, and to Jenny too. It is my great pleasure to present this presentation on COVID vaccine. As Bob mentioned, I've been involved with adult immunization for a while, and I actually, the clicker's not working. Any ideas? Well, you've got your job. We've got HB. Henry said he'd be there to change the slide. So next slide, Henry. Is that working? Okay. Does it need a kick? So as you heard, one of my major board assignments is my work with ACIP, which is the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. I also serve on CDC's COVID vaccine work group. Next slide, please. And on a somber note, on Friday, October 1st, the U.S. hit another grand milestone in the pandemic. Next slide. The COVID pandemic has now become the deadliest in American history, overtaking the Spanish flu of 1918, which killed about 675,000 people. The COVID death toll in the United States has now surpassed 700,000. 1 in 500 Americans has now died of COVID in the 19 months since the pandemic began. And the last 100,000 deaths have occurred during a time in which vaccines, which have been proven to prevent hospitalizations, death, and infection and serious illness, were made available to all Americans over the age of 12. Next slide, please. The first alert occurred on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2019, with a mysterious cluster of pneumonia cases in Wuhan, China. Less than 3 months later, we had a global pandemic. Enter Operation Warp Speed. Next slide. In less than a year, we had 3 safe and highly effective COVID vaccines. This is truly a remarkable achievement. To review, SARS-CoV-2 is the name of the virus, and COVID-19 is the disease caused by it. As you can see in the upper corner of this slide, the virus has spikes on its protein surface, which is like a corona, a crown, and these spike proteins are the main target for vaccine development. Both Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are mRNA vaccines. Both contain messenger RNA, which instructs the body's own cells to make the protein antigen, the COVID-19 spike protein, which then triggers the immune response. These mRNA vaccines are not new. For licensing, this was uncharted territory. There had never, ever been a vaccine licensed by the FDA which used a nucleic acid platform. So mRNA vaccines were new, but not unknown. Researchers have been studying them for decades. In early January of 2020, Chinese researchers posted the genetic sequence of this new coronavirus on the internet, and these mRNA vaccine companies got started right away. And thanks to research on SARS back in 2002, and then MERS a decade later, the scientists knew to focus on that spike protein. They knew how to purify the mRNA and how to stabilize it, and to protect it from degrading too quickly. The secret? A protective lipid nanoparticle coating. Next slide. mRNA vaccines have been under a lot of great scrutiny, and because they were a new type of vaccine, many worried about safety. CDC guidance has been reassuring. mRNA vaccines do not contain live virus. They cannot cause an infection. They can't give someone COVID. mRNA vaccines do not affect or interact with our own DNA in any way. The messenger RNA never enters the nucleus of the cell. It doesn't hang around. The body breaks it down within hours. Trials for both mRNA vaccines were huge. They enrolled diverse populations. Pfizer's phase 3 trial enrolled about 44,000. Moderna enrolled about 30,000. Next slide. On December 11th, 2020, near the stroke of midnight, mRNA vaccines had their Cinderella moment. Pfizer's mRNA got the green light for those aged 16 and older and became America's first COVID vaccine and the first mRNA vaccine ever to receive FDA's emergency use authorization. 1 week later, on December 18th, FDA authorized emergency use of a second mRNA vaccine, Moderna's mRNA vaccine, for those 18 and older. Next slide. America's V-Day was December 14th, 2020. This is the day we started putting vaccine into arms. So first it was Pfizer, and then there was Moderna. Next slide. Both are mRNA vaccines. Each requires 2 doses. Both were more than 90% effective. And then on February 27th, Janssen's one dose and you're done vaccine. It's a viral vector vaccine. It became number 3. Janssen is the pharmaceutical arm of Johnson & Johnson. So this Janssen vaccine uses a completely different technology. And with viral vector vaccines, you take a weakened version of a virus, which is the viral vector, then genetically engineer it to make coronavirus spike proteins in the body, which then trigger the immune response. Janssen's vaccine uses a modified cold adenovirus as its viral vector. Several genes have been removed from it, so it cannot multiply in the body. The genes in the vaccine cannot incorporate into human DNA. The virus is basically dead. The vaccine cannot give someone COVID. Janssen's COVID vaccine was 66.3% effective overall at preventing symptomatic COVID. Next slide. So we now have 3 safe and highly effective COVID vaccines. There was diversity in trial participants for all vaccines, all 3 of them, and there's also been very close post-authorization safety surveillance. Next slide. Fast forward to May 2021. A belated Mother's Day present from FDA expanded Pfizer vaccine EUA, emergency use authorization, to children 12 to 15. Next slide. And cross your fingers. Pfizer says their data on 5 to 11-year-olds looks good. We may have an FDA recommendation for a kiddie dose by Halloween for those 5 through 11, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Next slide. On August 23rd, 2021, Pfizer-BioNTech's COVID vaccine received full FDA approval for those 16 and older. It is now fully licensed for those 16 and older. The EUA emergency use authorization still applies to children 12 through 15. And emergency use authorization also applies for an additional mRNA vaccine dose for immunocompromised patients who received a 2-dose mRNA vaccine series. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later as well. So emergency use authorization, EUA, is based on the best available evidence. Full FDA licensing requires submission of a BLA, a biologics license application. Then the FDA reviews all that data with a fine-tooth comb, and decision is based on substantial evidence. So that's the difference between those 2 types of authorization. Next slide. Side effects. And I think most of us all know a little bit about what those side effects might be. Getting a dose of COVID vaccine is no walk in the park. You can think of these symptoms as a sign the vaccine's working. The good news is these symptoms resolve within 1 to 3 days. And another inconvenience is COVID vaccines can now be administered with other vaccines, which is really good because now it's time for us to also get our flu shots. Next slide. Why vaccinations, and I think we skipped forward a little too quickly for that. Oh, no, I'm sorry, you're right. Next slide. Next, side effects, and most of us know, we talked about the side effects. Next, why come on here, I'm out of order. Go forward on the slide, please. Back one slide, back. Okay, we'll stay right here. Next, why vaccination is important for children. Children are at risk of severe complications related to COVID-19, such as hospitalizations,
And MISC is also something that children can get. And MISC stands for Multi-System Inflammatory Syndrome in children. And this is a condition in which the internal organs shut down. Another concern for kids are post-COVID conditions. Kids can be long haulers too. And that's why the CDC continues to recommend COVID mRNA vaccines for those 12 years and older. And as the CDC director, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, has emphasized in a recent Senate hearing, 400 children have died from COVID. That is a huge number. Children are not supposed to die. And the CDC continues to recommend COVID vaccine for everyone age 12 and older. So let's get forward just a little bit, a few more slides here. Okay, now let's go over and talk about, I talked to you about side effects. I want to briefly talk to you now about warnings. And give me just a second here. Got it. All right, so we talked about the side effects you can have from COVID vaccines, but these warnings are different. Janssen's viral vector vaccine has been linked to rare types of blood clots in unusual places in combination with thrombocytopenia, really low platelets. And this syndrome has been named TTF, thrombosis with thrombocytopenia syndrome. Women under 50 need to be made aware of this risk and know that this has not been seen with mRNA vaccines. GPS-ERA has also been linked to Janssen's viral vector vaccine. There is risk, but the risk is rare. Another safety alert is myocarditis, heart inflammation after mRNA vaccines. Next slide. This occurs particularly within the 7 days after the second dose. The risk is higher in males under 40 and highest in young males aged 12 to 17. Some of these patients require hospitalization, some require ICU admission, but follow-up so far seems to show resolution of symptoms. Next slide. So there is a risk of myocarditis as heart inflammation after these mRNA vaccines, but you can also get myocarditis after COVID infection. And the risk of myocarditis after COVID infection is greater than that after vaccination. Next slide. So this is when I originally planned to talk to you about children and why it's important to vaccinate children. So I'm going to repeat. If children get COVID infections, they can be hospitalized, they can die, they can get that MISC, they can have the post-COVID conditions. So that's why CDC says it's very important for these children, for children aged 12 and older to be immunized. Next slide. And this is Rochelle Walensky talking at a Senate hearing about the number of deaths in children. At that time, it was 400, and now it's even higher. It's up to 645 children have died from COVID. Next slide. So the risk of getting infected right now is much higher because of this Delta variant. Delta now makes up over 99% of new COVID cases. It's a super spreader. It's super transmissible. It's super contagious. It's twice as contagious as all of the variants we've seen yet. The greatest risk of transmission is still among unvaccinated people, but fully vaccinated people with Delta breakthrough infections can also spread virus to others. However, fully vaccinated people with Delta seem to be infectious for a shorter period of time than unvaccinated persons. Next slide. And Delta is the reason that masks are back on. And I saw a lot of masks here today, which is great for keeping everybody safe. The CDC says both unvaccinated and vaccinated, fully vaccinated people need to wear masks in public indoor settings in areas of substantial or high transmission, which right now is just about everywhere. Next slide. Next, I'm going to talk about the importance of additional doses for immunocompromised persons. We now know that immunocompromised persons were not included in the phase 3 trials, and we know that the vaccines don't work as well in immunocompromised persons. Immunocompromised persons have weakened immune systems, and this can be from cancer, chemotherapy, medications for organ transplants, as well as other medications, including high-dose steroids. The next slide. And on August 12th, the FDA authorized an additional COVID vaccine dose for certain immunocompromised patients. And this extra dose gives these vaccinated but still vulnerable patients a greater chance of making enough antibodies to protect them from COVID. This recommendation only applies to those who got the Pfizer or Moderna mRNA vaccine series. It does not apply to those who received a single dose of Janssen's viral vector vaccine. And for immunocompromised patients, to get that additional dose is the honor system. You don't have to have a doctor's note. You don't have to have a prescription. You just go and tell them you're immunocompromised and you want an additional dose. And the details of the specifics of who's included in this is on the CDC website. And you do not need to check for antibodies before getting this dose or after getting this dose. Next slide. So we are so fortunate here in the United States to even be talking about an additional dose. There's so many people around the world that have not received even a first dose of COVID vaccine. And no one's safe until everyone's safe. The next variant is only a plane ride away. There was a news release that the Biden administration is planning to buy 500 million additional Pfizer doses for developing countries to send these people, and I'm so glad that they're doing this. Next slide. So an additional dose for immunocompromised patients is not a booster. It's part of an augmented primary series because the regular primary series was not protected. With that regular primary series, the immunocompromised patients were not able to build up enough protected antibody. A booster is given when protection from the series starts to wane. Next slide. And that is happening. Vaccine effectiveness has seemed to decrease over the last 1 to 2 months. Vaccine effectiveness against infection did drop over time since Delta became dominant, but vaccine effectiveness against hospitalization has remained relatively stable. Next slide. On Wednesday night, September 22nd, FDA authorized emergency use of a single booster of Pfizer's COVID vaccine at least 6 months after a primary series. And this applies to everyone 65 and older, for those aged 18 to 64 at high risk of severe COVID, and also for those 18 through 64 whose institutional or occupational exposure to SARS-CoV-2 puts them at high risk of serious complications of COVID, including severe COVID, and that also includes the long haul syndrome. So this would allow booster doses for healthcare workers, teachers, daycare staff, grocery workers, those who work in homeless shelters and in prisons. The third dose booster recommendation only applies right now to Pfizer vaccine and only to those who received a Pfizer primary series. Next slide. And that was the FDA recommendation. CDC's committee, ACIP, for which I'm a liaison, did that. And we reviewed all the evidence, we weighed the benefits and risks, and in a nutshell, the Pfizer boosters only apply to certain adults at least 6 months after receiving a 2-dose Pfizer series, and they have to either be 65 or have health issues or have a high exposure job or conditions to qualify. And to repeat, these boosters only apply right now to those who got a Pfizer mRNA series, and the time interval is at least 6 months after that second dose. Next slide. COVID vaccination is now recommended for all pregnant and lactating people. CDC recommends it, so does ACOG, which is the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and so does the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine. They recommend it too. And I don't know if y'all saw the front page of the Atlanta Journal over the last couple of days. There was a front page story about a woman who was pregnant that did not get vaccinated, and her baby died just weeks before it was supposed to be born. And that was part of her outreach to everyone, is to please encourage people to get vaccinated. That was a real life example that really hit close to home for me, because it was right where I live. COVID hits pregnant women hard, and it hits them harder than the general population. There is a clear link between COVID and pregnancy complications like preeclampsia, blood clotting problems, and stillbirth. So far, the safety studies for getting vaccinated during pregnancy have been very reassuring. Many women have become pregnant after receiving COVID vaccine as well. And for women that are breastfeeding, they should get COVID vaccination too. There was a recent study that shows that the COVID antibodies are passed through the breast milk, which can protect baby. So that's a way to protect the infant too. And these antibodies are present in the breast milk for at least 6 weeks after vaccination. And remember that none of the 3 available FDA authorized vaccines can cause infection. They cannot cause infection in mother or in baby. COVID vaccines do not affect fertility in males or in females. COVID vaccination is recommended for those trying to get pregnant now and also for those who might get pregnant in the future. Next slide. So some of what we call vaccination hesitancy may just be vaccination inconvenience, and unvaccinated Hispanic and Black adults are more likely than white adults to worry about missing work and having to pay for the vaccine as major reasons for not being vaccinated. They may not realize that the vaccine is free for everyone. In addition, unvaccinated Hispanic adults are more likely than unvaccinated white adults to say they're too busy, have difficulty traveling to a vaccination site, or they're not sure where to go to get the vaccine. Some of the unvaccinated may not be necessarily opposed to vaccination. They may just need a nudge. Next slide. And many creative incentives have been tried, like free food, free beer, cash, scholarships, lotteries, all these different things have been offered to try to make it happen. Barbershops, hair salons, and pop stars have been enlisted in the COVID vaccination push. So those were the carrots, and next came the sticks, the mandates. Delta Airlines stopped short of the vaccine mandate, and the airline's now making unvaccinated employees pay a surcharge of $200 per month for their insurance in addition to their health insurance. Next slide. The American Medical Association has joined forces with more than 50 other major medical organizations calling for mandatory vaccination for all healthcare workers. Now, we expected to see more companies making vaccination mandatory once the vaccine was fully licensed, and we have. Next slide. And on September 9th, the White House raised an even bigger stick. The president's announced COVID vaccine mandates will affect 100 million workers, and that's about 2/3 of the U.S. workforce. Employers with 100 or more workers must require a vaccine or conduct weekly COVID testing. They also have to get paid time off for getting and recovering from the shot. The mandate does not apply to smaller businesses. All federal employees and employees of government contractors must be vaccinated. The mandate also includes workers at nursing homes and hospitals that receive Medicare and Medicaid funds. The president also called for large entertainment venues to require proof of vaccination or testing for entry. Vaccination mandates are already in effect for the military. Next slide. So many still experience low vaccine confidence, and many people still have questions about vaccination. The AMA has joined with the COVID Collaborative and teamed up with the Ad Council on a new initiative called It's Up to You. And the goal is to answer vaccine questions all in one place. And I would encourage you to check this out if you have any questions. Next slide. The American Medical Association also has some other great resources. There's a section dedicated to COVID on our website. We have a COVID Daily Update video blog series on our AMA YouTube channel. Next slide. Please note that we're learning about COVID in real time. This is a new virus. No one ever expected this was going to happen. And my favorite go-to site is the CDC's interim considerations for COVID vaccines. This is a live document that's updated regularly. And so if you have a question, you can go to the CDC website and look this up. Most of the information is going to be easily found here. Next slide. So what's next? VRPAC, which is the FDA's Independent Advisory Committee, has announced several upcoming meetings. You know, we talked about now there's a booster recommendation for those who received the Pfizer series. On October 14th, they're going to be discussing boosters for those who received the Moderna vaccine. And just a little bit, few details about that. There are many studies that have been done looking at the Moderna boosters. They've done studies looking at half doses of the original vaccine and then a half and half of the original vaccine and a new vaccine. So all this is going to be revealed in this FDA meeting on the 14th. And then on the 15th, they're going to be reviewing information about giving a second dose for those who receive Janssen's 1 dose and you're done. So it may be 2 doses and you're done like the other 2 vaccines, but we'll hear more about that. And they'll also be talking at that time about what we call mixing and matching vaccines, or it's called heterologous boosting. That means getting a primary series of one vaccine type and getting a booster from another series. Next slide. And then on October 26th, the FDA Advisory Committee will be looking at the data for Pfizer's vaccine for the children aged 5 to 11. So Pfizer has publicly stated in their press releases that the data looks really good. Supposedly, the dose for the kids, the kiddie dose is a third the dose that was given to adults. Adults receive the 30 microgram dose, and the dose that they're studying for kids is a 10 microgram dose. But all that data will be presented at that meeting. Next slide, please. So right now, everyone's supposed to get their flu shot, but if you you've gotten your flu shot and you get the flu anyway, we have Tamiflu for you. Well, one of the pharmaceutical companies, Merck, has now announced that they're in the process of presenting some data to FDA about a new pill for COVID. It's supposed to cut the risk of hospitalization and death in half. But remember that these vaccines I told you about, these mRNA vaccines are 90% effective. So, but this is not available yet, but it's nice to know that they're still looking for ways to treat this infection. Next slide. So this is where we are right now. This is in the U.S. As of October 2nd, 65.2% of those 12 and older have been fully vaccinated. Next slide. In Georgia, overall, 44.9% of adults have been fully vaccinated. This data don't change like that. This data is also available county by county. Would anyone like to estimate what the vaccination rate is in Truth County? 31%. 31? Do I have any other suggestions? 34. 34? Okay. The big reveal. That's Fulton County where I live. That's 28.3% fully vaccinated. 19.5%. I'm glad I'm here today. So, with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Yes?
We tend to focus a lot on hospitalizations and death as being the major reasons to go ahead and get the vaccine. Can you talk for a minute about, I don't know if you've seen it, the Rutgers athletes were x-rayed after they got COVID. They didn't get COVID on the athletic playing field. They got it from home events or parties or whatever. And 20% had something that looked like pulmonary fibrosis. Now, what is the true extent of post-COVID disabilities, morbidities?
So these were, you just gave me about 3 or 4 questions in a row, but I'll just talk about that in general. So, as you saw from the slide, the vaccines are still very protective against hospitalization and death. But, you know, we want to be back in a room together. What we're finding is their protection against infection has dropped. And so that is why we're wearing masks. This is why we're now suggesting that people get boosters, so we can try to keep people from getting infected again. But we still have 3 safe and highly effective vaccines in preventing hospitalization and death. The next part of your question were effects of COVID. This is a brand new virus. We're learning about all this in real time. And what is your name?
Congressman, US 75.
Okay. As you mentioned, in these Rutgers athletes, they show signs of lung damage. This virus, you do not want to get COVID. Getting COVID is not the way you want to build antibodies. You want to build antibodies by getting a vaccine that will keep you from getting the infection. COVID can affect your lungs, your heart, your kidneys, your brain. It can cause that long haul COVID, and we see symptoms persist for 4 to 6 months, up to a year or longer. I mean, we're still following these patients. The NIH has put a lot of money into doing research into this, but you just don't want to be one of the guinea pigs. I mean, you don't want to be somebody that's studying with long COVID. You want to be someone that's protected from getting COVID. And I think your point brings up the fact that this virus can just do some really bad things to healthy athletes. So what would it do to the rest of us that maybe aren't quite as healthy as those young people? We don't want to get COVID. Any other questions? Yes?
I have 2. One, the 19.5%, I'm assuming that's down because we lowered the age, because originally wasn't it in the 30s? Before we added the 12, the whatever, maybe before, but it seems like we had gotten up in the 30s. And
All right, so I've got all those numbers down here. So overall, for Treat County, 19.5% of the total population is vaccinated. For the population vaccinated over 12 years old, it's 23.1%. For the population over 18 years of age, it's 24.2%. For the population 65 and older, it's 41.7%.
And then my second question was, there were several people, including my husband, who got the vaccine across the line in Alabama because it became available to him first over there for manufacturing. Is there a way to capture that in Georgia? Because I was told if they got it in Alabama, it's not in the GRIP system.
I don't know. Maybe they're 1% off out of 100,000. And there's probably more than that.
Yeah.
I think there are probably more people that got vaccinated where they live. But hey, I'm so proud of your husband for being determined to get vaccinated. That's right.
He works with Kia, which is in Trick County, but it's manufacturing is right on the line. So a lot of people then did go to Alabama because it was offered there first for manufacturing.
Well, let's just hope that 19% is not, 19.5% is not real. Let's hope it's artificially low. Because when I saw that, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to a dangerous place today. And I thought living in the city of Atlanta was dangerous. Yes, you have a question back here.
Do you anticipate that the COVID shot will become like the flu shot and something that we have to do every year?
You know, I think there's a lot of thought into that. It could be. I know that one of the companies is, several companies are looking at combining a COVID shot or a flu shot or giving them both at the same time. I think what I'm trying to focus on right now is just getting past this pandemic and getting everyone to a level of protection so we won't have people die and we can sort of get life back to normal. But I think time will tell. This mRNA technology, I will tell you, when I first heard about it, I didn't know what to think. Because of my position on this COVID vaccine task force, I've been in a position that I can actually ask questions to the pharmaceutical representative people that actually are making this vaccine, those researchers. And it's an amazing technology. And what they can do is that they have that genetic sequence of the virus. They can, if it changes, they can plug a new sequence in and make a vaccine. But this technology is extremely clean. You know, it's injected in your arm. One thing that does happen, did any of y'all notice that your underarm, your arm was a little sore after you got the vaccine? Yeah. It goes right to those lymph nodes under your arm. But then the vaccine is like
Your body destroys it within just
hours, so it's not like something that just sort of hangs around. So it is just, to me, it's just one of the most marvelous technologies and, that I've been exposed to since I've been working with vaccination. So we'll just time it out. I don't know. Yes, that's all the questions, y'all know. All right, so everyone's got the promise. Are you coming back there? Yes.
What the numbers have to be, to mean that we're out of the pandemic?
So what you're asking, the question was, what do the numbers have to be to show you're out of the pandemic? That's the herd immunity thing. So, 19.5% is not there. I've heard numbers 75, 80%.
Well, I mean, of cases, like when we start seeing the cases decrease, what would the number of cases have to be within the United States or worldwide to say, we're through the pandemic, it's still here, but the status of pandemic?
Well, I don't think we're going to end this pandemic until we get more people vaccinated. So I'm not quite answering your question. I can't give you quite the answer to that. I think the only way we're going to end this pandemic is to get people vaccinated. Thank you so much for having me. I
don't know how you keep it all straight right now, to be honest with you, but there's a lot of medical folks in the audience today, and I think that they feel like maybe they just saw Eddie Van Halen. Thank you for being here today. In honor of your speaking, we're going to give a donation to the Polio Flush, which is Rotary's initiative to end polio worldwide. So thank you for being here. Next week, we've got Henry Jacobs brings his brother to talk to us about the State Department. And with that, we'll turn. Thank you.